So there's been quite a bit of discussion as of late within the United States about ranked choice voting, or what we in Australia call preferential voting. And look, we use it in pretty much all systems of government to elect members to single member seats. And in the United States at the moment, there's currently a very high profile mayoral race in New York City, and the primaries there are being conducted using ranked choice voting. And ranked choice voting is a bit of an interesting point of conversation in America. It's currently banned in 11 states in America, which sounds insane. But on the other end of the spectrum, in the United States, there are currently 2 US states where ranked choice voting has now been implemented at a statewide level. And that is in Alaska and in Maine. And as an outsider looking at that, as somebody who lives in a country where we have used preferential voting for upwards of 100 years, it is insane to think that that issue is so contentious. But I thought I would use the opportunity to explain why and how Australia came to use ranked choice voting so early on in our country's history, relatively speaking. So let's go back to the beginning. After Federation, Australia used a first-past-the-post system, which most people are pretty familiar with. It is simply the person who gets the most votes in a seat wins that election, regardless of how much they got. If they got 40%, 30%, or even less than that, as long as they got more votes than any of the other candidates, they were elected. And that was the norm in Australia for just under the first 20 years of the country's existence. Now, I won't get into the early days of Australia's very confusing three-party system and how that functioned, but the other thing you need to know is that by 1918, there was a well-established two-party system in Australia between the Labor Party on the left and the Nationalist Party on the right. And look, with first past the post in place, that was a relatively stable system with only 2 political options. But the entire political system was thrown head over heels with the emergence of a new Conservative party, the Country Party. The Country Party, or the National Party as it's known today, was founded specifically to represent the interests of rural farmers in politics. They had this belief that the Nationalist Party, focused mainly on the cities, was not connected to what regional conservatives actually wanted. So this Farmers' Interest Party came onto the scene, and because it was so localized in regional areas, it actually did very well in terms of what a political party could be expected to do. This real show of strength and electoral success that the Country Party would eventually find was first shown properly during the Swan by-election in 1918. Now, the member for Swan, an electorate in WA, had died of cancer, and as such, when an MP dies, a by-election is called for their seat to elect a new member. And it is traditionally a very, very safe nationalist seat, but the introduction of the Country Party really threw things completely out of whack. A seat that the Nationalists were winning uncontested previously was now suddenly actually competitive. And with 2 Conservative parties competing for the Conservative vote, the Labor Party found itself with a unique opportunity. These were the results of the Swan by-election. Do you see a problem here? You will notice that the Nationalist vote and the Country Party vote, when put together, are a clear majority. It is undisputable that this is an incredibly conservative seat, but that support for conservative parties has been perfectly split down the middle, and with that split, Labor has just managed to eke ahead and get elected in that seat. Now, the federal nationalist government was horrified by these results, and I can understand why, because look, I'm not sympathetic to the right wing of politics in this country, but I can see the blatant unfairness of a system like this, first past the post voting, where conservatives get upwards of 60% of the vote, but the seat still goes to the Labor candidate who barely got a third. So the nationalist government made the decision that from here on out, all federal elections at all seats on the federal level will be conducted using preferential voting, ranked choice voting, if you want to call it that. And that paid off dividends for them. 2 months later, in Victoria, the exact same situation occurred, but under a preferential voting system. The Labor candidate won on the initial total vote, but then after preferences, the seat went to the Conservative candidate, not to the Labor candidate. And that pretty much solidified the notion amongst conservative Australians at the time that if they were going to have a country party and a city party for representing different branches of conservatism that they had to use preferential voting going ahead. So in a fascinating twist, in Australia, ranked choice voting was not implemented by left-wing people seeking fairer political representation. It was implemented by conservatives faced with the political reality that in Australia, the broad conservative movement is quite fractured. And from election to election, time to time, conservative parties will have to compete against each other as well as against Labor. And that necessitated a system of ranked choice voting. And look, this was kind of unavoidable for Australia because since 1909, there has really only been one political reality that has existed in the country. And this underpins everything about Australian politics. And that is the fact that you are one of two things if you exist in politics in this country. You are either Labor or anti-Labor. That is the true divide within Australian politics. Because just take a look at Australian conservatism. Look at the coalition. That politically makes no sense whatsoever. It is a union of liberals, free market, Reaganite individuals who want to see markets opened up and freedom of trade between countries, partnering with the National Party, which, as I've said before, are agrarian socialists who want the economy to be managed in such a way that disproportionately protects Australian farmers and the Australian farming industry. That is not a natural union. The reason that the coalition exists is because those two parties have very little politically in common other than the fact that they want to oppose the Labor Party. And this is consistent throughout all of Australian history. Go back to 1909 when the first Liberal Party formed. It was formed as a merger, and I'm not joking, of the Protectionist Party and the Free Trade Party. The two most diametrically opposed political parties you could imagine coming together and forming a joint pro-business party just because they had to oppose the Labor Party. The Labor Party has existed at a federal level in Australia since the country's inception. Its state-level divisions within colonies go back to the 1880s. It has always been the boogeyman for Australian conservatives, who only have one ideological point of agreement, and that is that Labor shouldn't win elections. In a system like Australia's, where conservatism is as fractured as it is between parties and divisions, you kind of need a preferential voting system for elections to work in any capacity. So if you want to thank somebody or anybody for the fact that Australia uses preferential voting, and you're happy about it, and you've seen other countries struggling with first past the post and how bizarre and terrible that system is while we don't have to deal with it, then I'm sorry to say, you're gonna have to thank the National Party on this one. So that is the video, just a quick farewell. So it's over now. You can leave if that was all you were interested in. But I just wanted to say thanks again, guys. This topic here as to why Australia uses preferential voting was the second most popular option in the poll I conducted a couple weeks ago, asking what you guys want to see me cover. And I was just so blown away by how controversial the idea of preferential voting or ranked choice voting is in the United States. So considering it was the second most voted for topic back in that poll and that it was such an issue in America, I thought I'd dive back into the history of it and remind myself to be grateful for the fact that that is the system that we have in this country. So thanks again to the subscribers that recommended this topic. This was a pretty fun video to throw together, and I feel like this is something that I should say at the end of a video, which is genuinely thank you guys for how crazy the growth has been here. I was blown away by the fact we were about to hit 25,000 just a couple days ago. We are now well past 26 and on the cusp of 27, and 30,000 doesn't seem that impossible anymore. So that's kind of unreal. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. So all I can really say is thank you guys. Thank you for suggesting the topics. I hope you enjoy me covering them. And yeah, I think we're about to actually get into the campaign of the Tasmanian election. So trust me, guys, there is plenty more to come.